I won't participate in that stupid contest, my lady cried. They're just going to boss me around. Then she turned and pointed at me, her slender finger tipped in red. Yen Yen, why don't you go in my place? I stood frozen, my breath caught somewhere in my chest. How was that even possible? Chapter 1, Yen Yen, the Maid. My young lady, Ping-ai, the third and youngest daughter of Lord Yen, had been selected to participate in a bridal contest, one that would determine the future bride of Lord Mu-jin, the second son of Minister Qin. Pampered since birth and rarely made to lift a finger, she clung to her father's sleeve, her eyes glistening as if the matter before her was an unbearable burden. Lord Yen's lips pressed into a thin line as he leaned back in his chair, one hand resting along the armrest while his fingers tapped lightly, his silence stretching as he weighed his options. Declining was not truly an option. He had already spent a considerable sum to secure Ping-ai's candidacy. His two elder daughters had been married to a merchant and a soldier, respectable matches, but not enough. For years, my lord had sought entry into the capital circles, hoping to expand both his wealth and his standing. This is for your own good, and the family's, Lord Yen said at last. Why do you think I arranged this for you? He pulled his sleeve from her grasp and took a measured sip of tea. Do you know how many girls would wish for this chance? I stood quietly to the side, my hands folded, watching him with lowered eyes, hoping he would continue to press her. Winning, deceiving, impersonating, none of it was meant for someone like me. Ping-ai's expression darkened, her lips tightening as if she had accepted defeat. She glanced briefly in my direction, her gaze sharp, and I lowered mine further, pretending not to notice. Then, slowly, she smiled. It was slight, but unmistakably deliberate. She stepped forward to face her father, her posture shifting as her hands moved behind her back, a familiar habit whenever she had formed a plan. A chill ran through me. Father, she said, her voice calm now, do you truly believe I can succeed? The question made him pause. If you think about it, I wouldn't last a single round. Then she turned, gesturing toward me with quiet ease, her smile returning with certainty. Why not send someone who actually can? Lord Yen followed her gaze, his eyes settling on me as his brows drew together. You two do resemble each other, don't you? My heart jolted. I shook my head at once, but as his expression slowly shifted, I already knew. It was too late. Chapter 2, The Qin Residence. I arrived in the capital a month later, my heart heavy and my nerves stretched thin. The carriage stopped before the grand gates of the Qin residence. Tall brass doors, engraved with lion faces, loomed over me, stern and unwelcoming. For a moment, I stood there, unable to move, neither forward nor back. The driver had watched me closely throughout the journey. No doubt under orders from Ping-ai, or my lord. I swallowed and forced myself across the threshold. Inside, the courtyard was already filled with young women, far more than I had ever seen gathered in one place. There must have been close to 100. They varied in age, height, and bearing, yet all were carefully dressed, their beauty enough to turn heads. Among them, a few stood apart. They carried themselves differently, calmer, more assured, their expressions composed, their gazes distant. Even without introduction, it was clear they came from higher standing. 5 lines had been formed across the courtyard, each leading to a servant seated at a table, recording names. My fingers tightened around the small silk pouch in my hand. Inside it was Ping-ai's name tag. No one's going to pay attention to you, she had said, tossing her robes into my arms before I left. You don't have to try. Just get through a few rounds so my father won't blame you. Her words had been light, careless, she had never taken this seriously. A sudden push at my shoulder broke my thoughts, and I stumbled into one of the lines. More girls quickly gathered behind me, pressing forward. When it was my turn, the servant took the name tag, wrote Ping-ai into the ledger, and handed it back without a second glance. I let out a quiet breath and moved on, keeping my head lowered as I followed the others toward the residence assigned to the candidates. I was led into a room shared with 3 other young women. They stopped what they were doing the moment I entered. Their eyes settled on me, cool, assessing, unwelcoming. Don't ever let those women step on you. Ping-ai's voice echoed in my mind. You are me, she had said, pointing between us. So show them who I am. We were the same age, and I had served her since I was 12. No one knew her manner better than I did. If I had to pretend, then I could do it well. I straightened my back and walked in without hesitation, ignoring their stares as if they meant nothing. I placed my things on the last empty bed, then sat down, crossing one leg over the other with deliberate ease. Slowly, I lifted my gaze and met theirs. One by one, they looked away. A faint smile formed on my lips. For the first time, I felt something unfamiliar stir within me. Not fear, but power. That night, a banquet was held to welcome the candidates. In place of the Chin family, 3 judges greeted us, their presence formal but distant. The tables were filled with rich dishes and fragrant wine, each more tempting than the last. The women did not hold back. After a day of tension, they quickly gave in to indulgence, their laughter rising as conversation flowed more freely. I ate my fill, then quietly excused myself. My plan was simple: remain unnoticed, avoid forming ties. The less they remembered me, the better. Outside, the full moon hung high in a clear sky, its light casting a soft glow across the courtyard. The air was still, almost inviting. I walked farther from the noise, crossing the trimmed lawn until I reached the edge of a small pond, where the water reflected the pale shimmer of the moon. For a brief moment, I thought I could breathe. But voices followed. Startled, I stepped back into the shadows, keeping myself hidden as I searched for the source. Not far from the pond, 3 young women stood unsteadily, surrounding a male servant. Their movements were careless, their gestures sharp as they pointed and shoved at him. He remained bent slightly forward, offering apology after apology, yet when he tried to leave, they blocked his path. "I told you to kneel. Didn't you hear me?" one of them snapped, her voice rising above the quiet night. The other 2 laughed, unsteady on their feet. "I've already apologized, my lady," the servant said, his tone restrained. "It was you who bumped into me." "What?" they echoed, their voices turning sharp. "Do you know who I am?" the same woman demanded. "I'll remember your face. When I become the lady of this house, you'll be the first I dismiss." I let out a quiet scoff. "Be careful with your words," I said, stepping out from the shadows. "What makes you so certain you've already won?" They turned at once. "Who are you?" the woman asked, approaching me, her stance unsteady but defiant. "Me?" I echoed, letting out a short laugh. "You don't know who I am?" I lifted my chin slightly, letting confidence settle into my voice. "I am Ping Yan. And if you don't leave now, you'll regret it." I stepped closer, slow and deliberate. I rolled my sleeves to my elbows and placed my hands on my hips, just as Ping I would. The 3 exchanged glances, their earlier arrogance wavering. Without another word, they retreated, their steps uneven as they made their way back toward the dining hall. "We'll report you," one of them called over her shoulder. I ignored them. Turning back, I faced the servant. For a brief moment, our eyes met. "Thank you, my lady," he said, his gaze lingering slightly longer than expected. I waved it off. "I've been there. Being a servant is not easy." The words slipped out before I could stop them. I froze, then quickly covered my mouth. "I mean, I've seen what my maid goes through. So I understand." My voice faltered at the end. "How careless of me." He frowned slightly, as if noticing the slip, but did not question it. "Are you here to enjoy the moon?" he asked instead, glancing toward the sky. I nodded. "Then you should also see the sunrise here," he said. "Don't be late. It's worth it." He paused briefly before adding, "Consider it my way of repaying you." With that, he gave a small bow and turned to leave, his hands clasped behind his back. As he walked away, I thought I heard the faint sound of humming trailing after him. Chapter 3: The First Test. The next morning, I woke at the first rooster's crow. It was habit. For years, I had risen before dawn, preparing water for washing, laying out clothes, tending to Ping Ai from the moment she opened her eyes, then following her through the day with one task after another. But now, I didn't have to do any of it. For a brief moment, the thought settled in. My body loosened, my limbs sinking back into the bedding as my eyes drifted shut again. It felt almost like a luxury. But my mind refused to follow. This was no rest. Today was the first day of the contest. I had no idea what awaited me, what test would be given, or whether anything I knew would be of use. By the second crow, I was already sitting up. My feet touched the cold floor, grounding me. Don't panic, I told myself. I only needed to pass a round or two. That would be enough. Then I could return to the Yen residence, back to what I was. My roommates were still asleep, their breathing slow and even, undisturbed by the early hour. I doubted anything would wake them just yet. Carefully, I slipped past their beds and opened the door. I would see the sunrise at the Chin residence for the first time, and likely the last. The courtyard was quiet when I stepped out, the sky still dimmed with the promise of dawn. The sun had yet to rise, but a long table had already been set across the lawn. The 3 judges from the night before sat behind it, composed and waiting. A few servants stood at either side, lanterns in hand, their soft light casting faint shadows across the ground. Congratulations, Judge Chung said as he rose. You have passed the first test. He appeared to be in his mid-30s, his face half-shadowed in the dim light. Come, he continued, gesturing lightly. Tell us your name. Ping I Yen, I said, lowering my head slightly. So much for going unnoticed. The first bridal test had begun the night before, the banquet, unannounced, unnoticed by any of the candidates. The contest was not about talent or beauty, but to measure a woman's character. Slowly, one by one, more candidates began to arrive in the courtyard. I recognized a few familiar faces, the young ladies of higher standing. Their gazes lingered on me as they passed, each taking her place in line to my right. Mi Jin Hong, I had caught her name, arrived shortly after I did. She looked to be the youngest, and perhaps the most beautiful. She stood in silence, her gaze drifting past everything but me. Even from where I stood, there was something about her, an air that made her seem distant, untouchable. When the sun finally broke over the horizon, its light stretching across the courtyard, a servant struck a copper bell. The sound rang clear, cutting through the quiet. Those of us present were led into the main hall. The 3 judges joined us soon after. The first round, Judge Chung announced, has already been decided. A ripple passed through the room. A worthy wife, Judge May, the only female judge, added, rises before her household, before her husband, not after. Her sleeves swayed lightly as she spoke. A proper lady knows restraint. Indulgence reflects poorly on judgment. The meaning settled over us like a shadow. I glanced sideways. Mi Jin Hong did not react like the others. If anything, her expression remained unchanged, almost as if she had expected this outcome. And just like that, the first test was over. More than half of the candidates, those who had lingered too long at the banquet, those who had risen late, were dismissed. Everyone had barely breathed out a sigh of relief when the last judge stepped forward. The second round, Judge Song announced, his tone edged with quiet authority, will test your skill in embroidery. A murmur rose at once. Each of you will present an embroidered piece, he continued. What are we to embroider? A voice called from the crowd. Judge Song's jaw tightened slightly. The subject is your own choosing, he said. But your work must represent you, what you would bring into this household. A stir broke out at once, louder this time. Silence. His voice cut cleanly through the noise. Your work will be judged by Madame Chin, tomorrow, at the same hour. That last detail settled heavily over the room. Tomorrow. Would I have enough time? As dusk settled, I carried a small lantern, its glow lighting a narrow path toward the quiet garden I had found the night before. I paused, letting my gaze sweep over the space. It was empty, only the faint outline of plants in the dim light. Slowly, I lowered myself onto the grass, my palms pressing against the dry ground. Crickets chirped softly, their rhythm steady, almost soothing. I closed my eyes, letting my thoughts drift anywhere but here. Just for a moment. My lady, a quiet voice sounded near my ear. What are you doing? I startled, my eyes flying open. Turning too quickly, I found him closer than I expected, so close my breath caught, my lips nearly brushing against his. The servant I had saved. Shadows fell across his face, but even in the dim light, I could make out the sharp line of his jaw, the bridge of his nose, the faint curve of his lips. He didn't move. Didn't fall back. His gaze lingered on mine, steady and unflinching. I leaned away instinctively, my hand reaching for the lantern, but he was faster. He picked it up and lifted it between us, the warm light filling the space, drawing his features into clearer view. A hint of amusement touched his lips. We meet again. Chapter 4, Kongbin. Don't be alarmed, he said, setting the lantern down between us as he finally straightened. My name is Kong Bin. You saved me from trouble last night. I nodded once, letting out a slow breath. I'm not, I said. Just startled. My voice still trembled, betraying me. There was something off about him. For a servant, he smiled too easily. And he did not merely look, he held my gaze, steady and direct. A little bold. He smiled again. I'm glad to see you here. It means you passed the first test. Congratulations. I hesitated, then asked, did you deliberately tell me to wake early this morning? He let the question linger. I searched his expression, but found nothing I could read. Then he broke into a grin. You took my advice, he said, almost pleased. I reached out and struck his arm. He blinked, startled, stepping back at once. Why did you hit me? Confusion flickered across his face. I thought you'd be happy. I raised a finger to my lips, signaling for silence. You could get into serious trouble, I whispered. What if someone saw you helping me? You could be punished. Or worse, dismissed. Something in his expression shifted, softening. Were you worried about me? He asked, pointing at himself. But I'm only a servant. So what? We're the same. He stilled. We're in the same position, I corrected quickly. It's not just about you. Besides, how did you know about the test? He rubbed the back of his neck, his lips pressing together. I overheard it, he said. By chance. I studied him. There was nothing remarkable about the way he dressed, plain, unassuming. Yet something about him didn't quite fit. Still, I pushed the thought aside. With a quiet exhale, I took out a wrapped handkerchief and held it out to him. For you. He accepted it, glancing at me before unfolding the cloth. Inside were small confections, colorful, glossy, carefully made. He looked up, a spark lighting in his eyes. It's not a bribe, I said quickly. And I didn't steal them. They were my share. Then why? He asked. To thank you. What else? My cheeks warmed despite myself. I'll gladly accept, then, he said, popping a piece of green taffy into his mouth without hesitation. I watched as he chewed, his jaw moving slowly, thoughtfully. He reached for another piece. My gaze lingered a moment too long. I wondered how it tasted, the sweetness, the texture. I should have kept some for myself. But I had been in too much of a hurry, grabbing what I could before anyone noticed. My mistake, he said suddenly, his voice gentler now. Do you want some? I shook my head. I have them all the time. I'm tired of them. He smiled, folding the handkerchief with care. Then I'll save the rest. He tucked it into his robe, almost gently, as though it mattered. What is the second test? He asked. Are you prepared? Don't remind me, I groaned, sitting cross-legged, leaning back on my hands. It feels like a riddle. I understand the task. I just don't have the answer yet. I glanced at him briefly. His brows were drawn together, his gaze sharpening. Why? He asked, intrigued. I let out a slow breath, my eyes drifting into the distance. Because I've never imagined myself as someone's wife. As a maid, I had always known my life would be tied to my master's. There was no other path. So I learned not to dwell on things like love. It wasn't a luxury, it was a privilege. Then why come here? He asked. Isn't this all for marriage? I was forced to, I replied, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Anyway, after this test, I'm leaving. I gestured for him to lean closer, even though no one was around. My father won't blame me if I pass 2 rounds, I whispered. A quiet laugh escaped me, but when I looked up, I realized how close we were. This time, I didn't pull away immediately. Why was it so easy to speak to him? Someone I had only met twice. Someone no different from me. Or perhaps, it was simply the night. His hand lifted, hovering near my cheek. I turned away. I remembered who I was meant to be. Ping Ai. My lady. I could not afford to cross a line that would damage her name. The air stilled between us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I cleared my throat. Can you tell me something about Madame Chin? I asked. His eyes widened slightly. What do you want to know? Anything, I said. What she's like. What she favors. He studied me. I thought you didn't need my help. This is different, I said quickly. I'm not asking for the answer. Just details. I know better than to cheat. After a pause, I added more quietly, and this will be the last favor. Something in his expression shifted, just for a moment. Fine, he said at last. Madame Chin is quiet. Strict, but fair. She values order. Discipline. I pressed my fingers to my temple and sighed. She sounds admirable, I said. But that's still vague. Is there anything else? A habit, perhaps? He frowned slightly, thinking. She spends time in the east courtyard, he said. There's an old plum tree there. It blooms in winter. She still visits it even in the cold. A plum tree, I murmured. In winter. Something stirred in my mind. An idea. A small smile touched my lips. Thank you, I said, rising quickly and brushing the dust from my dress. He was still watching me, his expression unreadable. You've figured it out already? He asked. If I'm right, you'll see me here again tomorrow night, I said, turning to leave. Then I paused. I'm sorry I kept you so long, I added over my shoulder. The next morning, Madame Chin sat behind a paper screen. The room had fallen silent the moment she arrived. One by one, the candidates stepped forward, presenting their work. Time stretched, each moment heavier than the last, until it was my turn. I carried a wooden tray, the handkerchief resting on top, shifting slightly with each step. I bowed and presented it to her attendant. My name is Ping Yan, I said. I present my embroidery. I paused, steadying my breath. A plum branch. Chapter 5, Plum Blossoms. My heart pounded as Madame Chin silently examined my embroidery. Her features were hidden behind the screen, her expression impossible to read. My embroidery, a plum branch in bloom, its petals stitched in soft pink silk, each tipped faintly with red. Against the pale cloth, the blossoms gathered quietly, as if enduring the cold. I had stayed up through the night, sketching, stitching, undoing, and beginning again, adjusting patterns, changing threads, until nothing felt out of place. By the time I finished, the room had fallen into disarray. Papers, loose threads, scraps of fabric scattered across the floor. I stepped carefully between them before collapsing onto my bed, too exhausted to think. My 3 remaining roommates had already been dismissed after the first test. The silence had been a blessing. And all those years of working for Ping, stitching in her place, perfecting every detail only for her to claim the credit, had not been wasted. She had always been praised, always at the top of her class. Still, I had never felt this kind of pressure before. My fingers curled slightly at my sides. Faint red marks lingered along them, traces of hours spent guiding the needle through silk. My eyelids felt heavy. I had been called last, and the waiting had left me less anxious than drained. Why have you chosen plum blossoms? The attendant asked, her voice calm as her gaze settled on me. I straightened, forcing myself fully awake, and bowed. A single branch, I said, in bloom despite the cold. Though it stands apart, it still belongs to the tree, quietly supporting it in its own way. Do you see yourself in this, then? She asked. I nodded. Yes. When Kongbin mentioned the plum tree in the east courtyard, I had imagined Madame Chin standing beneath it, watching as the petals fell, one by one. Not simply admiring its beauty, nor seeking rest, but recognizing something within it. Endurance. Seasons of hardship, weathered in silence, until at last, bloom. I could not yet see myself as a wife. But I could see her. And so, I followed that image. Perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps I had misunderstood the test entirely. My chest tightened as the silence stretched on. Still, I chose to trust my instinct. A woman's beauty is not only what she shows, but what she carries within, I continued. And her strength lies in quiet endurance, in the way she continues, even through hardship. For a moment, there was only silence. Then Madame Chin cleared her throat. Her attendant stepped forward and gestured for me to withdraw. Judge Song stepped forward and called out several names, me Jin's, then finally mine. The 5 of us moved forward together. The 5 of you have passed the second test, he announced. Congratulations. A stir rose behind us, whispers, soft complaints, restrained disbelief. Only then did I realize I had been holding my breath. I let it out slowly. Judge Song began returning our embroidery one by one. When he stopped before me, his gaze lingered. Ping Ai, he said, yours has been selected as the finest among them. Madam Qin praised not only your craftsmanship, but your perception. You are outstanding. Before I could respond, he stepped aside, just enough to clear the space between me and the paper screen. I bowed at once. Thank you for Madam Qin's kind words. There was no reply. But as Madam Qin rose, her hand resting lightly on her attendant's arm, I thought I heard it, a soft, fleeting chuckle, before she disappeared behind the screen. I straightened slowly. When I turned, I met Mi Jin's gaze. Her expression had darkened. In her hands lay a piece of white silk, upon which a golden phoenix had been stitched, its wings spread wide, poised as if mid-flight. The work was exquisite. The threads caught the light, giving the illusion of movement. Alive. I understood her disappointment. The third test will be decided by Lord Muwen himself, Judge Song continued. The Lord is aware of your efforts and has granted you a few days' rest. A ripple of relief passed through the remaining candidates. Those at the back are dismissed. The crowd began to shift, but Judge Chung's voice cut through the movement. There is one more matter. The hall stilled. There is one among you who will be disqualified. A murmur rose again, sharper this time. This person has violated the conditions of the contest, he continued. They have deceived us. My hands tightened at my sides. My heart would not steady. Was he speaking of me? Had they discovered the truth? Sweat gathered in my palms. My nails pressed into my skin as I forced myself to remain still. Step forward, Judge Chung said, his voice slicing cleanly through the air. My foot shifted before I could stop it. I closed my eyes, willing myself to move. But... You, he called. Step out. I opened my eyes. No one stood before me. At the far end, the judges had gathered around a young woman. She collapsed to her knees, her hands covering her face as she broke into tears. I'm sorry, she sobbed. Please forgive me, I won't do it again. Judge May bent down and picked up the cloth at her feet. You had your maid complete this for you, she said, her voice firm. One of our servants saw you exchanging it at the west gate. She straightened. Leave. There is nothing more to be said. A cold chill ran through me. For a moment, I had seen myself in her place, exposed, judged, cast out. I could not confess yet. There was still the next test. And I would fail it, surely. As I let out a quiet breath, my gaze lifted and met Mi Jin's. Something flickered in her eyes. Suspicion. A faint unease settled in my chest. I could not help but wonder how long she had been watching me. Chapter 6, Lord Muwen. Mi Jin had led me to a quiet corner of the courtyard. Her expression remained indifferent, if anything, her eyes had grown colder. Arms folded across her chest, she stood with deliberate insolence, her posture bordering on mockery. It was obvious. Though I was still slightly older, she showed no intention of offering even the slightest courtesy. Withdraw from the next test, she commanded. I let out a short breath, almost a scoff. Since when did she get to decide for me? Why? I asked lightly. Do you feel threatened? If I was going to play Ping Ai, I might as well commit. Color flared across her face instantly. What's the use of your skills? She sneered, circling me at an unhurried pace. How would they benefit Lord Mu Wen's position? She stopped in front of me, lips curling into a cold smile. A maid could do just as much as you. Your father, she gave a soft snicker, lifting her sleeve to hide her mouth, though the mockery in her eyes was undisguised, is a nobody. Trying to climb the social ladder through his own daughter. Too bad you're not even pretty enough. You're no match for Lord Muwen. My fingers curled at my sides. And what makes you think you are? I asked. I'm different from you in every way, she replied evenly. From status to beauty. My family can elevate Lord Muwen's position far faster than yours ever could. And I will be his image. His most prized gem. There it was again, that glimmer in her eyes. Almost reverent. Had they met before? Then why was she here, competing like the rest of us? I raised a brow. And has he asked for any of that? She froze. Just for a moment, but it was enough. That explains it, I said calmly. If you do marry him, here's some advice, don't decide what's best for him. I tilted my head slightly. That's not support. That's overstepping. Her composure cracked. What would you know? She snapped, her voice rising. You've won a few meaningless tests, don't start preaching. She shoved her shoulder into mine. I didn't move. Instead, I pushed back, just enough. For a moment, we stood there, neither yielding, the air between us tightening like a drawn bowstring. Neither of us backed down. Lord Muwen, I despised the man. If not for him, I wouldn't be trapped in this absurd situation. A name carried on whispers and praise. The likely next head of the Qin residence. That alone was enough to draw women in droves to his door. So what? I scoffed inwardly. I had yet to meet him, yet the world already spoke as if he were untouchable. If he were truly that remarkable, couldn't he have chosen a suitable wife on his own? Why go through the trouble of a public selection? Did he think himself royalty? Lost in thought, I nearly walked straight into someone. I halted just in time. Black robes brushed my vision, rich fabric threaded with gold, catching the light in quiet authority. I'm sorry, my lord, I said at once, lowering my head. No response. Only a soft, low chuckle. Then he moved past me, his shoulder grazing mine, deliberate, unhurried. I stilled. Something stirred in my chest. A flicker of recognition, faint, but unsettlingly familiar. I turned sharply, scanning the path behind me. But the figure had already vanished around the corner. I frowned. Who was that? Kongbin stood ahead, his broad back to me. A spark of mischief stirred. I quickened my steps, lips pressed tight to keep from smiling. Just a little closer. He turned suddenly. I froze mid-step, breath caught in my throat. A soft chuckle escaped him. I frowned, inching forward with a pout. How did you know it was me? He didn't answer. Instead, he caught my hand and pulled me behind him, guiding us swiftly behind a wall. Voices drifted closer, footsteps, nearing with each passing second. We pressed ourselves against the brick, silent. Waiting. His hand remained wrapped around mine, warm, steady. My body stiffened. I wasn't even sure why we were hiding. The moment stretched, longer than it should have. The voices passed, fading into the distance, yet neither of us moved. Aren't they gone? I whispered. He glanced over his shoulder, checking. Then, without a word, he tugged my hand and led me in the opposite direction. Hey, I hissed softly, following after him. Where are you taking me? He stopped. Slowly, he turned his head, just enough. Do you trust me? He asked. It was too dark to see his expression clearly, but his voice had deepened, quiet, certain. I hesitated. Everything about this felt unfamiliar, being alone with a man, standing this close, my hand still held in his. My thoughts tangled, slipping away from me. All I could hear was my heartbeat, racing faster with each passing second. Before I could answer, my fingers curled instinctively around his. Kongbin paused for the briefest moment, then moved again. He glanced around, pushed open a side gate, and led me through. We stepped out onto a street, and then further still. Into the inner city. The sudden burst of noise startled me. Bright lantern lights forced my eyes to narrow, the world shifting from shadow to color in an instant. And then... I smiled. The wide street buzzed with life. Crowds moved in waves. Vendors called out, selling food and trinkets, jewels glinting under lantern light. Music filled the air, laughter, chatter, even the occasional gasp from street performers weaving tricks and illusions. I turned to Kongbin. He was already looking at me, a knowing smile playing at his lips. I heard you're allowed a few days off, he said quietly. Why not enjoy one tonight? It was impossible to refuse. We wandered from stall to stall, lingering over small games, pausing here and there. At times, Kongbin would subtly shield me from the crowd, guiding me past brushing shoulders and careless steps. Our hands met more than once. Each time, I felt it, that lingering warmth from before. His touch was gentle. Smooth. Strangely so, for a servant. I leaned against the wooden railing of the bridge, gazing down at the still lake below. The moon's reflection rippled gently each time a breeze passed. Here, the noise had faded. The crowds had thinned. It was peaceful. A quiet contrast to the lively chaos from earlier. Kongbin stepped into view, his shadow stretching before him. He came to stand beside me, resting his elbow on the rail, his chin propped lazily against his palm. His gaze found me almost immediately. Will you really leave after the next test? He asked, voice low. You could win this. And then what? My fingers tightened slightly against the wood. I had come here for a task my master had ordered. None of this had been meant for me. And yet, for the first time, I had enjoyed it. Competing. Learning. Living, if only briefly, the life I had once imagined for myself. But time was running out. In the end, I was nothing more than a disguise. I won't marry someone I know nothing about, I said, giving a small shrug. What do you want to know? Kongbin leaned a little closer. Lord Muwen is a great man. Good-looking, gentle, capable, and wealthy. He counted them off on his fingers, one by one. I waved it away. That's nothing I haven't already heard. He's your master, of course you'd only speak well of him. It's the truth, he said quietly, his gaze softening. I let out a small laugh. Then he's too good to be real. And even if he is, that's not love. I shook my head lightly. It's just a marriage built on benefits. My eyes drifted toward the dim horizon. Love shouldn't be like that, I murmured. It shouldn't be measured or chosen based on gain. It should be free, something that allows two people to connect, without conditions. I want someone to love me for who I am. Not because I passed a test. Not because I was the best. But, all of me. Even the flawed parts. I turned to him. He was already looking at me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. And strangely, it wasn't Lord Muwen I found myself thinking about. It was him. This man standing right in front of me. Despite everything, I wanted to know him. Wanted. To fall for him. Would you still like me, if I weren't who I am? The question rang loudly only in my head. Because I already knew the answer. After tonight, we would go our separate ways. I turned away, extending my hand into the night air, letting the cool breeze slip through my fingers. I think Lord Muwen and I are a mismatch, I said. He's looking for the best woman to be his wife, not someone to love. He may not realize it, but he's only made my life more complicated. A faint, bitter smile touched my lips. Silence settled between us. When I glanced back, Kongbin's expression had darkened, subtle, but unmistakable. Unusual. Thank you, I said, forcing a small smile. For everything. Tonight included. Take care of yourself, I added, reaching out to pat his shoulder lightly. Life isn't easy for servants. You're scolded more than you're praised. But still, live honestly. So you can hold your head high. A laugh broke from him. I blinked. What? Sometimes, he said, eyes lingering on mine, the way you speak, the way you act, it's not very ladylike. You're different. I could have said the same about him. Mysterious. Elusive. I had never seen him during the day. He appeared only at night, like a flicker of light in the dark. I am a lady by birth, the words cut off as my foot slipped. The world tilted. I lurched forward, balance lost. But before I could fall, Kongbin's hand wrapped around my waist, pulling me back. In one swift motion, he spun me toward him, holding me securely against his chest. Too fast. Too precise. Not the reflex of an ordinary servant. Our eyes met. Too close. I could feel my heartbeat, sharp, uneven. My breath came shallow as the moment stretched, suspended. I began. But the word never left my lips. He leaned in and kissed me. It was quiet, but certain, like a decision he had already made long before this moment. My mind blanked. My fingers tightened instinctively against his sleeve, grounding myself as everything else blurred. For a second, just a second, I forgot who I was supposed to be. Forgot why I was here. Chapter 7, The Last Test. Lord Muwen had announced the final test. The remaining 4 contestants were to prepare a full-course meal, each presenting their dishes on separate nights. I was first. This will be the last, I told myself, standing before heaps of ingredients, fresh herbs, roots, cuts of meat laid out in careful abundance. I picked up a root and brought it to my nose. The scent was warm, familiar. My fingers stilled. Sandalwood, it had clung faintly to Kong Bin's robe. I remembered it clearly, the moment my head had rested against his chest, the scent surrounding me before I even realized how close we were. I dropped the root at once. Heat rushed to my face. Kong Bin, how dare he? The kiss had been sudden. And I had been careless. I had wrenched myself from his hold and run, straight back to the Qin residence without once looking back. Even alone in my room, my heart had refused to calm, pounding wildly as if it might give me away. His warmth had lingered. And no matter how I tried, I couldn't forget it. What unsettled me most wasn't the kiss itself. It was that I didn't hate it. I exhaled sharply and snapped a few roots in half, dropping them into the clay pot over the fire. The broth simmered, bubbles rising and breaking as steam curled into the air. I glanced around before scooping up half a spoon of salt and tipped it in. A faint smirk tugged at my lips. I couldn't wait to see Lord Muwen's reaction when he tasted it. Perhaps that would serve him right. But, would it be too obvious? The thought lingered. I stirred the broth slowly, watching the surface ripple before lifting a spoonful to my lips. Just one taste. But my vision began to blur. My heartbeat lurched, fast, uneven. The spoon trembled in my hand. Then slipped. It clattered against the floor. My knees gave out soon after. I tried to speak, to call out, but no sound came. And then, there was only darkness. The first thing I felt was bitterness on my tongue. Then came the dryness, sharp, scraping, as I tried to swallow. I forced my eyes open. A face hovered above me, blurred at the edges. Before I could make sense of it, a voice reached me, clear and familiar. Yen Yen? Ping, I muttered. Her hand waved lightly before my eyes. Are you awake? I pushed myself up despite the stiffness in my limbs. My muscles protested immediately, weak and unresponsive. My lady, my voice came out hoarse. I pressed a hand against the bed to steady myself. Why are you here? She rose without answering, drifting toward the table at the center of the room. There was no urgency in her steps. No concern. Only that same careless, almost childlike ease. I shouldn't have expected anything else. She poured herself a cup of tea and drank it in one go before glancing back at me. The Qin residents sent word about your incident, she said at last. You were poisoned. I was. The realization came slowly, like wading through fog. Fragments of memory flickered, then slipped away. How long have I been out? 2 days. She shrugged lightly, as if it were nothing. The poison wasn't serious. It only paralyzes the body. Enough to knock you out for a while, 2, maybe 3 days. She walked back toward me, though she stopped just short of the bed. Likely meant to stop you from competing, she continued. The Qin servants found nothing. No trace. Do you remember anything? I shook my head. A dull ache pulsed behind my temples, forcing my thoughts to scatter. Everything felt distant and blurred. Is my lord here as well? Of course. Father rushed over the moment he heard. A perfect excuse to meet the Qin family. He's with them now. Ping Ai's gaze remained fixed on her fingers, idly twirling a strand of hair. What about you? She waved a hand dismissively. Don't worry. I told them I'm your maid, Yen Yen. A soft laugh slipped from her lips. Then, we should return, I said. We can use this to forfeit the contest. Why? Her voice cut in sharply. I stilled. I thought you didn't want to. I've changed my mind. She stepped closer this time. I've met Lord Muwen. A smile bloomed on her lips, sweet, almost dreamy. He's exactly as they say. No, even better. I've decided I want him. My chest sank. The words struck harder than they should have. But a man's appearance and status aren't everything. I tried to convince her. Pink Ice's expression darkened then. Her tone sharpened. Yen. This is an order. I heard you outperformed the others twice. Now it's just you and one more girl left. Something cold slid down my spine as her gaze locked onto mine. I don't care how you've done it so far. You will win this for me. Father will make sure you're allowed to continue. Rest well. She already turned away. The air felt heavier. Harder to breathe. And just like that, she left. The door closed. Silence followed. I sat there, unmoving. My chest felt tight, too tight. Just when I thought everything might return to normal. Why did it turn out like this? And Kong Bin. He must have heard. Was he worried? Or had he already distanced himself? If Ping Ai truly married Lord Muwen, our identities would be exposed. My fingers curled weakly against the sheets. A bitter thought surfaced, unbidden. I almost wished I hadn't woken up. I followed behind the servants, each carrying a tray of the dishes I had prepared, toward Lord Muwen's chamber. With every step, my feet grew heavier. I slowed, then stopped. Mi Jin stood ahead, waiting. Go on, I said quietly to the maid in front of me when she glanced back. I'll follow shortly. They hesitated, then continued on without me. I stepped forward. Mi Jin's dark, rounded eyes narrowed, her lips pressed thin. Her chest rose and fell unevenly. You're persistent, she hissed. Must I use real poison next time? So she admitted it. Not that I needed confirmation. I let out a slow breath. Too late, I said. My voice was steadier than I expected. I held her gaze, just long enough to make something in her falter. I'll win this. Her jaw trembled. The anger in her eyes wavered, blurring into something else, something fragile. I'll never let you have Lord Muwen, she cried, her voice shaking. You have no right. No status to stand beside him. I'll make him choose me, I replied evenly. That's the difference between you and me. I can. And I will. Her body went rigid. I didn't wait. Brushing past her shoulder, I walked on without looking back. Justice wasn't needed. In that moment, I had already won. I tied the mask over my face, securing it in place. Ask Lord Muwen to delay the marriage for 3 months, Ping Ai had said. Time will blur memories. By then, your face will fade in their minds, and I can take your place. I stepped into his chamber. Lord Muwen was already there, seated behind a paper screen. The dishes had been arranged neatly before him. My lord, I said, bowing slightly. My apologies for keeping you waiting. No response. A maid guided me to the seat across from him before quietly withdrawing, the door sliding shut behind her. Silence settled. My gaze fixed on the screen, on the shadowed figure beyond it. So this was the man. The one who had thrown my life into disarray. The one who had nearly cost me everything. And yet sat there, untouched by it all. My hands curled tightly in my lap. Ping Ai, is that your name? His voice broke the silence. Are you feeling well? Were you able to prepare all this? I almost laughed. I'm fine, my lord, I replied slowly. I hope the dishes are to your liking. How predictable. A test like this. A wife must cook. Must serve. Must prove her worth in ways that pleased others. I'm sorry, he said. Your life was put in danger. I will find the one responsible. There's no need, I cut in, my voice sharper than intended. I'm alive, as you can see. Whoever did it meant no real harm. They must still answer for it. They cannot treat a human life so lightly. My fingers tightened. Then does my lord think you have the right to? I shot back. The words slipped before I could stop them. How is this any different? You gather women here to compete for you, fight over you. Were you entertained? Silence crashed down. Stop, I told myself. This wasn't what I was supposed to do. I was meant to win him over, not provoke him. A faint rustle. The figure behind the screen rose. My heart lurched. I kept my eyes fixed ahead as he stepped out from behind it. Black robes. Threaded with gold. A little familiar. Will you allow me to explain? His voice came clearer now. Closer, each step closing the distance between us. I lifted my gaze. And saw, Kong Bin. I shot to my feet, stumbling back a step. Then another. Kong Bin. The name barely left my lips. Your Lord Mu Wen? My pulse pounded in my ears. The truth crashed in all at once. Chapter 8, Final. Yes, it's me, he said quickly, stepping closer. I didn't mean to deceive you. You didn't mean to? I echoed. A hollow laugh slipped out. Then what have you been doing all this time? I shook my head, the disbelief burning hotter with every passing second. As if the test wasn't enough, you had to test me yourself? Heat surged through my chest, rising fast, blurring my thoughts. The man I thought I was beginning to fall for. Was him. The very man behind this absurd trial. Every word I had shared. Every belief I had revealed. How foolish must I have looked? Even now. Will you let me explain? He pressed, impatience threading through his voice. After everything between us, don't I deserve that? I stilled. He exhaled. Like you, I never wanted this marriage. Not now. But my parents kept pushing, introducing woman after woman. A faint, bitter smile touched his lips. So I said I would only marry the best. It was meant as a joke. His gaze flickered. I never thought they would take it this far. And even then, I planned to reject them all in the end. I didn't think, his voice faltered. I didn't think it would lead to this. That it would put you in danger. A pause. My fingers curled slightly. I was selfish. I won't deny that. I wasn't disguising myself to test you. Meeting you, that was never part of the plan. You were different. You hated this test. You questioned everything about it. And yet, you still gave it your best. As if, you respected it. I met his gaze. A faint crease formed between his brows. There was no mockery there. And because of you, he continued, I started to believe in something I never cared for before. Love, he said simply. Everything you said, it made sense. It's not about status. Or advantage. It's about two people, how they understand each other. How they choose each other. He stepped closer. Slowly, carefully. His hand lifted, hovering near my cheek, brushing lightly against the edge of the mask. I love you. His voice was quiet. But certain. Will you marry me? For a moment, time stilled. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, faster than ever before. I stared at him, unable to move, unable to think. Did he truly mean it? My mind resisted, but my heart had already leapt ahead. Warmth, joy, something dangerously close to hope. To be loved. To be chosen. There was nothing more intoxicating. But Ping Ai. The name struck like a blade. The one he was meant to marry was her. Not me. I stepped back instinctively. His hand fell before it could reach my mask. Why? He asked, confusion flashing across his face. I couldn't answer. My thoughts spiraled, tangled. He knew me as Ping Ai. He knew my face. If this is about your identity, you don't need to worry. I looked up sharply. What do you mean? Your name isn't Ping Ai. It's Yen Yen. You're her maid. The words landed with a quiet finality. I had it investigated. I'm sorry. A sharp breath caught in my chest. My voice trembled despite myself. So, you knew all along? He nodded. His hands closed around my arms, firm, almost desperate. And it doesn't matter, he said. I don't care who you are. I love you, Yin Yin. I'll take care of you. I promise. I can't. The words broke out of me before I could stop them. I pulled free, shaking my head as tears blurred my vision, dampening the mask. Pain spread through my chest, sharp, relentless. I can't betray my master. I turned before I could falter. And ran. Yen Yen. His voice followed. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. I ran through the corridors, past flickering lanterns, toward Ping Ai's guest chamber. Each step heavier than the last. Each breath harder to take. A part of me, a selfish, fragile part, whispered to turn back. He loved me. Not Ping Ai, but me, despite everything. His expression, when I refused him, lingering, haunting. Was I making the right choice? Ping Ai's hand struck my face. The force sent me crashing to the ground. Pain burst across my cheek, sharp and immediate. I barely had time to steady myself before her expression darkened further, twisted with fury. I told you to win the contest, she snapped, not to bewitch the man I was meant to marry. Her voice trembling with rage, her words cut deeper than the blow. You ungrateful slave, is this how you repay me? My father? Before I could respond, she seized the teapot and flung its contents over me. The tea had cooled, but not enough. A burning sting spread across my skin. I gasped, instinctively curling in on myself as the pain lingered, sharp and clinging. Old Lord Yen sat nearby, watching, and unmoved. I forced myself upright. Then slowly, painfully, I knelt before them. I'm sorry, I never meant for this to happen. I whispered, my voice trembling as tears blurred my vision. One hand clutched the other, the skin still stinging from the burn. I didn't know. I didn't know he was in disguise. What use is your apology? Ping Ai cut in sharply, stepping closer, looming over me. Will it make the Qin family accept me now? I turned desperately toward her father. My lord, please. I've never disobeyed you. Not once. And I'll never forget what you've done for me, raising me, my fingers pressed into the floor. Just this once, I love him too. Then his jaw tightened. You foolish girl, he said coldly. You've shamed both my daughter and my household. You will be punished. He turned away, addressing a servant nearby. Take her. Lock her up. We leave for the Yen residence at once. No. I cried. But a cloth was forced over my mouth before I could say more. My voice muffled into nothing as my arms were bound, my struggles useless against their grip. They shoved me into a wooden chest. The lid slammed shut, and darkness swallowed me whole. The air turned thick, suffocating. I lay there, bound and helpless, forcing myself to listen, straining to catch any sound beyond the box. Footsteps, voices, the faint scrape of movement. Then, the box lifted. My body jolted as it shifted, swaying with each step. A sob tore through me, silent and broken beneath the cloth. Lord Mu Yen. The one thing I should have done was tell him the truth. How I felt. My chest tightened painfully. I wanted to see him just once more. The movement suddenly stopped. My body went still. Voices broke out, loud, urgent. Closer than before. I thrashed, kicking against the sides of the box, trying to make noise, anything to be heard. Please. Just as my strength began to give out, the lid was torn open. Light flooded in, blinding. I gasped, blinking rapidly as a shadow fell across me. A face, relief, concern, of Lord Muwen. Epilogue. Some time had passed. The red mark on my hand had begun to fade. The memories lingered, but I had learned to push them away, burying them deep where they could no longer disturb the present. Lord Yen and Ping Ai had shifted the blame onto me, claiming I had acted on my own. They accused me of stealing Ping Ai's identity to enter the contest. But Lord Muwen did not believe them. Though their punishment was light, he made certain of one thing. They would never set foot in the capital as they had once intended. Madame Chin took me in as one of her personal maids. She was a woman of rare grace, beautiful, wise, and deeply respected. Under her guidance, I learned not only how to manage a household, but also what it meant to stand as a wife. I admired her greatly. "Doesn't it bore you?" Lord Muwen asked one morning as we walked beneath the gentle warmth of the sun. "Has my mother been hard on you?" I shook my head lightly. "I've quite enjoyed it," I replied. "If it's to support my lord, then there is nothing I wouldn't do." He stopped. Turning to face me, he placed his hands gently on my shoulders. "I don't want you to become someone who goes against what you believe," he said, his gaze steady, earnest. I smiled. "Rest assured, my lord. You accepted me for who I am. I won't question that. For now. I simply want to become better. That's all." His hands fell slowly, his fingers slipping into mine as we resumed walking. "I'll be taking up my post tomorrow," he said. "I won't return until everything is settled. It may take 3 months." His grip tightened slightly. "Will you be all right on your own?" A faint smile touched my lips. "I won't be alone. Madame Chin has shown me a kind of warmth I've never known before. I enjoy her company. More than mine?" His ears tinged red, a flicker of jealousy slipping through. I hid my smile behind my sleeve. "I'll miss you, my lord," I said softly. "Perhaps, more than you'll miss me." Our hands tightened around each other. "I wish next year would come sooner," he murmured. "I regret setting our marriage date so far away." "It isn't. Time will only deepen what we have." I looked up at him. "But, like you, I look forward to that day."